My name's Nate and this is Heavy Pedal Garage. This is the channel where we're bringing this 1975 Firebird back to life. If you go back and check out previous videos, you can see the progress up to date. And today we're going to work on putting the electrical components back into this dash. So the light switch, wiper switch, the console gauges, all those things. And I'm going to go through and show you each of the plugs that we're dealing with so that you know when you do yours where each of those plugs match up. Alright, so this is all the stuff that we're going to hook up today. Quick quiz on all these things, if you can figure out what they are here before we get them in. More power to you. So I've gone through my wire harness and matched everything up. I've got little labels on each of the wires I think we're going to need. I do have a few mysteries in there that may or may not be needed. I have some wiring diagrams that I can share later that I found on the web that may help me. I think some of those missing some of those open plugs that I haven't figured out in there might be for accessories that did not come on the car. This car didn't have power door locks, power windows, some things like that. So we're going to get started on some of these smaller pieces and get those put in, and then I think we'll end finally with this gauge cluster. Now, a while back I went through and got all these cleaned up, repainted, blah blah blah. But let's get started with some of the smalls and move on up to the bigs. Okay, so we're going to start with the headlight switch. The back of the headlight switch has got the provision for your mount. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 prongs. This is what your plug looks like for your headlight switch. You have to start with the headlight switch first. The reason you cannot put your wiper switch in first, from experience I know this, is that this switch will not go in the way it's supposed to be mounted. So in order to get it in, you got to put it in sideways and then rotate it. So if you have your switch for your wipers in place, you won't be able to get it in there, you won't be able to rotate it, and plus the plug comes into the switch from the bottom, and that wiper switch is going to be in the way. So we're going to put it in sideways first, and with the plug prongs facing the passenger side, we're going to easily be able to clip this into place. Now we can rotate it into position. Then we can put our screws in. We'll leave the bottom one out because of the wiper. So before you put this top bolt screw in, there's this little grounding strap. I'm assuming that's what it is. It's a grounding strap. So make sure you get that in place as well. Okay, so our wiper switch is going to be next. It's got 4 prongs. It looks like it has 5, but that actual larger top prong is what slides into this clip to hold it in place. And this is what your plug looks like. So we're going to slide that out through the hole here, line up our switch and plug it in. So there is one piece that I didn't install, and that's the prism for the wiper switch. And it just goes in this groove right above the wiper switch, and it helps light up the emblem that's on your dash console. Okay, so this spot right here is going to be for your cigarette lighter, and the cigarette lighter actually does have a trim ring on it that comes off. So we're going to go ahead and leave that on for now, just so I don't lose it. But here's your provisions for electric to your cigarette lighter. So you've got this orange oval plug that goes to the center, a flat black plug that goes to the prong on the outside of the body, and then a light bulb that slides into this recession here. So that's it. And then we can get this in place with the 3 Phillips head screws. And I'll just note that this single brown wire with the black plug connects into your heat harness, which we will not be using because we switched to vintage air. So I've deleted the rest of that harness by simply unplugging it from that brown plug. I love that. So next, we've deleted the factory air slider, and we're going to use the vintage air provided, which is all electronic. So we're going to run this wire through over towards our HVAC box. So this mounts in place simply using the 3 OEM provided screws and screw locations on the dash console, and you don't need to use brute force strength to tighten these into place. Just a light snug will do. They're not going anywhere. You don't want to tighten it down so much that you again break those thread holes. So the louvers on both sides were mounted as part of the dash upholstery video, so those are already done. And I'll just add here, you can see this is where the Trans Am formula gauges would go. This is an Esprit car, so my panel does not have an opening for these gauges. I've considered, drilling out my panel and putting in a oil pressure and coolant temperature gauge to go here and here. They would easily fit. You can buy the trim rings to match, but I'm not going to do that right now. We may end up doing that in the future, but as I mentioned, I might go with an electronic gauge set, so we're not going to worry about that. I'll add too, the same with the lights in the whole setup here. I'm just going to check them and see if they work and replace any bulbs that are burned out. If I knew I was going to keep all of this, I might upgrade to the LED bulbs, at least replace all of them, but for now I just want to get it done, and the bulbs, as long as they're not burned out, will work for me. So when it comes to mounting your gauge cluster, this large plug right here will only go in one way, at least on mine. But there's a couple other things to think about here. You have this light, and it's on a cable, and this is actually a fiber optic cable that runs down to your ashtray, and that provides light in your ashtray. But this gets plugged in to this open spot right here. We've got the speedometer cable that clips in. So I've lubricated this and we should be good to go. I'm going to put that in last. I think this is probably our tightest deal here. Just clippy clippy. It's probably be a little easier with that steering column still back down, but I'm hoping I can just angle it in here. Okay, so to get this in, I do believe it'll be a lot easier if we just drop the steering column back down using the two bolts that are just underneath the column here. Okay, so it's actually two nuts. I think I said bolts. But hey, I've had this column up and down like 20 times, so I guess my advice is leave that sucker down until you're sure you're ready to drive. And even then, maybe go down the road 5 blocks before you put it up. Jeez. All right, so we're gonna clip this Speedo cable in place. Just a quick little push connect. All right, we'll see what happens. I just moved the light for the ashtray over to this side because it was really tightening up. Maybe I moved it on accident from one corner to the next or something. Okay. There we go. Seated. All right, now there's just, same as the rest. If it's not a Phillips, it's a 5/16 nut driver. We got 4 of these. Alright, so just a few more things to do here before we can actually turn the key and see if the lights come on the way they should. So under the steering column here, just a couple more things. We got this bracket, the vintage air duct gets screwed into that. And there's 4 bolts to hold this bracket on. One here, one there, up inside here, and up inside there. So we'll get those tightened up. And then also there's 2 ground wires under here. And they've got the eyelets attached to several of these wires. So both of those grounds come factory and they get installed just underneath here, up under. There's a bolt that you can screw that to. And then of course I added my ground to the console gauges, and I'll put that on there too. So there's 3 grounds. We're getting ready to install this. I had redone this with a vinyl carbon fiber print years ago. Cut the rings off. Actually, I didn't cut them off. I just, broke through the glue that holds them on and then repainted them all and reinstalled. But we're talking about how this is supposed to be installed. So, you know, of course, here's where your lights and your wipers go. This little square here is where that ends up. So you just throw it on there like that, and there's a couple little tabs here that just goes through to make sure it's on right. And then I'm going to go ahead and bend this tab just a little bit. Don't want to break the plastic, just enough to hold it on while we're inserting this. Okay, so to put this bezel back in is actually pretty simple, but it can be pretty tight. I don't know if it's from the vinyl or if because this thing sat, you know, without the bezel in it for a while, but it is pretty tight. But basically, you just need to get that in there, start it in the bottom, and you can just work this back in until it is seated in place. And then once that's done, check out these pictures from 78ta.com. There's 5 bolt locations, actually 3 Phillips heads and 2 bolts up underneath. All installed. Got our seatbelt indicator going, which is annoying as heck, but pretty cool. Turn signal's going. Got our gauge lights. There's that. Even the headlight switch when the dome light's on. Got the buzzer. Making all kinds of noise here. So there we go. It's looking pretty good. Pretty happy with how it turned out. Got the sounds going, which is really cool to hear for the first time. But we're moving right along, guys. I did a video on how to restore the contacts for the gauge cluster. If you want to check that out, go on back and see it. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. We are up over 1,000 subscribers now, so thank you so much for that. Very, very cool. But listen, catch me next time.